Morning, everybody. Great to be back in front of a live audience after such a long time, and many thanks to KSI for organising the event and all their efforts in having to postpone it and change venues, and also obviously handle the situation with the current SOPs in place. As always, we have a very distinguished panel to look to the future of education and hopefully past this current pandemic. I'm Guy Perring. I'm based here. I've been here for the last 15 years. I work for iGraduate, we run the largest worldwide survey of student opinions and views, allowing institutions and governments to benchmark their performance. That's my quick plug, no more of that. So now over to our panel. I'm sure they're familiar faces to all of you. So I'm only going to introduce their names and their titles rather than reading the bios. The full bios are available in the sheet if you want to check. So to the far right, Dr. Habibah, who, as you well know, is Director General of Education at the Ministry. Dato Satinah, who has a number of titles. Director of Melawar Learning Resources. Also Managing Director for Alsagoff, a board member for UPSI, and perhaps most importantly, she's an advisory and consulting company in terms of the National Education Plan. Dr. Yatela, who's the CEO of Yayasan at Sime, Darby. Professor Mushtak, who is from Heriot-Watt. You'll notice he's not here. He should be online. Can we just check that Prof. Mushtak is online? Is he online?
Yes, I am online.
Great, thanks a lot. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Guy.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah.
You'll be the third, Mushtak. You'll be the. Okay, Mushtak, you'll be the third speaker. So I'll obviously introduce you when you're ready. Okay. And then over also at the end, you already heard from Prof. Mohan, President of NAPEI. So we're going to try and keep the remarks as brief as possible. The speakers have agreed to keep it to well under 10 minutes. We've got a much larger audience than we expected, and it's great to see you all out there. So please prepare some questions for the audience. I've got a list of questions that I can ask, but I'd much prefer if we can get the audience engaged with this process. So if I can ask Dr. Habibah to begin with her opening remarks. Dr. Habibah.
Thank you, Guy. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. I think to our topic of cultivating the right education ecosystem post COVID-19, the synopsis that was given to me was how have policy changes been made. In that regards, I think ever since we achieved independence, education in Malaysia has undergone tremendous changes and development, from a very fragmented education system to that was serving for communal needs. It has evolved into an education system that is to produce a competitive society that is strong, united, and resilient. To that effect, important to the education system is the various seminal reports that have been produced along the way, and it has culminated into the Education Act 1961 and the revised Education Act 1996. And we also have the National Education Philosophy of 1988. I think that underlying all this is for the education system to promote national unity, to produce human resources appropriate for the national development, and to develop a progressive as well as a disciplined Malaysian society. Underlying all this, it has been our goals of access, quality, equity, having a united society, and for this to happen, an efficient and effective delivery system. So throughout all these changes, whether the leadership changes at one point or another, which we have seen has happened in the education sector lately, the goal has not changed. Perhaps the narrative or focus has changed slightly, but the ultimate goal still remains the same. So currently, we do have the Malaysia Education Blueprint, which focuses on 5 system aspirations of access, quality, equity, unity, efficiency, which has remained across time. So perhaps the target has become even more ambitious. We also have student aspirations that have translated the national education philosophy into what we want our children to look like after going through 11 years of schooling. So it translates the philosophy into certain attributes that we want from our children. So most important is that the end goal has remained, regardless whether the narrative or the focus have slightly changed. If I relate to the COVID-19 pandemic, schools were closed when we had the MCO announced and enforced since March 18th. Now it's more relaxed. But then at that point of time, when we enforced MCO, schools had to be closed. And we restarted to open in June 24th, and in a staggered manner. We started with the exam classes, SPM, SVM, STPM, STAM, because it was a more manageable number of about 500,000 students. They were the more matured students, so could abide or follow with the guidelines that we have come up with together with Majlis Keselamatan Negara as well as the Ministry of Health. So it was a health situation. So it's not a matter of just education per se. So we need to consult with the various people who are the authority in this area. But then, before we even started reopening our schools, access to education, the system aspirations, we still want to achieve those. So how do we now provide education to our students when schools are closed? Education most of the time equate to schooling, but now it's no longer the physical school. Children are at home, students are at home, and teachers are at home too during the MCO. But how then do we provide education to the children from the teachers who are both at home? Then we started to come up with a guideline on how teaching and learning can happen during the MCO. Definitely, I think the first that comes to mind is remote learning or distance learning, or what we call also as home-based learning. And the first that we emphasized was on the digital learning. But then again, the policy has been to provide computers to computer labs, to schools, and the connectivity has also been provided to schools. But then now, as said earlier, teachers and the students are at home. So they may not have the necessary devices as well as connectivity. Thus, the ministry had to strategize and how to bring learning to students while they are at home. So we used definitely our digital platform, the LIMA, we call it now, Digital Education Learning Initiative Malaysia, the LIMA, or previously known as MOEDL, MOE Digital Learning Platform. So the platform provides various softwares, various applications for teachers and our students to use while they're at home. For instance, we have the Google Classroom, Google Meet. We have a lot of resources in there, such as the digital textbook. We also have videos of teaching and learning that teachers and students can reach out to. We also have EduWeb TV as well as CikguTube, eGuru for parents to also seek out these resources. But then again, we saw that close to 40% of our students do not have access to such devices to enable them to reach to these resources. Only 2 to 10% have any form of devices such as PC, notebook, or tablet. 2 to 10%, depending on the device as well as their locality, whether it's urban or rural. So it can be as low as 2% and as high as 10%. But handphones are much higher. 34 to 48% of our students have access to handphones, but mostly at the secondary level. At the primary level, it's usually owned by the parents, so they need to compete with the parents to use the handphones. And if they have more than one in the family, they also need to compete among the siblings. So there are certain gaps that we see. So while we are trying to provide learning, education at home, but then we see there are certain gaps. So while the COVID-19 pandemic has facilitated for digital learning to happen faster than we anticipated, because we are also gearing up towards the fourth industrial revolution, at the same time, it also points to certain issues that we need to address, particularly in terms of equity, in terms of narrowing the gap between urban-rural, between children who have and the have-nots. Thus, we also provide other platforms such as education TV. So we have moved from terrestrial TV to EduWeb TV. But then not everyone gets access to the web. Thus, we need to move back towards terrestrial TV. So we introduced 2 hours at first. Then we expanded to 6 hours daily. And we also have very committed teachers who posted the education materials, who went with the Pusat Kesihatan, Pejabat Kesihatan Daerah to reach remote areas with the education materials. And we also have drive-through, for instance, for parents to pick up work from school or designated places. All this towards ensuring that students get access to education and learning during the MCO. But now that we have reopened the schools, we need to handle other issues with regards to ensuring safety and health of the children. So to me, when we talk about policies, it has to be very much linked towards with what we have planned out for. Ultimately, what is our goal that we want to achieve? But then there are situations that happen that we need to re-strategize to ensure that the end goal is still achieved. So that strategizing is very important to happen, not just in terms of getting access to learning, but also in terms of assessment. There are so many assessments that we couldn't have, particularly the sit-down assessments. So how do we now gauge learning among our children? How impactful have been the learning during MCO? How do we make sure other assessments which has been sit-down like the SPM, STPM, matriculation can still happen? So I think while we talk about the right education ecosystem, policies are there to ensure that we achieve certain goals and aspirations. The aspirations, the targets are ambitious, and we need to move towards that ambitious target. But then situations may happen which may derail what we are aspiring for. So the most important is how do we then re-strategize and manage the situation and the issues, challenges that come our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Habibah. Just a quick follow-up question. You're one of the authors of the Malaysia Education Blueprint. Does it need revising? Is it still absolutely relevant? Or what do you think the future is for the blueprint?
Since you mentioned that I'm part of the writing team, I think it is still relevant. But then again, we didn't have things like, say, the fourth industrial revolution in it. We didn't emphasize a lot on the social and psychological makeup of the children then, which we see is very much impacted during the MCO. So certain things may crop up, issues may crop up, which we may need to further. Revise, for me, I like to think about the Malaysia Education Blueprint as something alive, which we can take into account other things that happen, but it shouldn't derail us from our original aspirations.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Habibah. Dato Satinah, over to you for your opening remarks. Dato Satinah.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And salam sejahtera, very good morning. I think since that I was also actually part of the education blueprint for one term with Dr. Habibah, I don't need to talk about it anymore. But I think my perspective today will be very much from outside. I concur with Dr. Habibah, the policy will stay. The fundamentals of policy in education will stay. But however, emphasis as well as what we prioritize in terms of implementation are the things that probably may differ. The narratives may be a little bit different from one minister to another. So basically, actually, today I want to just talk a little bit on my perspective, my role as the members, one of the 11 members of the National Education Advisory Council. We were appointed actually in 2018 during Dr. Mazli's time, and we are ending our terms actually end of this month, and it will be surprising to mention the council members, 11 of us, we come from very diverse group. So there are 3 of us who are hardcore educationists, myself, Tan Sri Wan Zahid, and Mr. Ramanathan, who is also a union person. Then we have a couple of professors from respective universities. We have a representative from PIBG, PTA, Dr. Datin Azima, and we also have a STEM expert, and so on. We actually received our mandate during that time in August 2018 and finishing end of this month. And believe me, whether you believe me or not, we actually, our team is one of the most hardworking, I was told by Dr. Habibah, one of the most hardworking council, 11 council. We met over 90 times in 2 years, meetings as well as syndications. So that's quite a bit. And we serve 3 different ministers of education. So mind you, we had the first minister, Dr. Mazli Malik, the second minister, Tun Mahathir, and the last one now we have our current minister. And we also serve 2 different Director General and 2 different Secretary General. Notwithstanding that, we are very focused. The role that was given to us was to look at actually the policy direction, the gap in policies in education. So we came out with a couple of proposals. We have had many meetings. Last week we had more or less our last meeting with the senior officials, KSU, the DG, and we presented our own proposal. I think this is the only platform that I have, Dr. Habibah, in mentioning what we have done for the last 2 years. And we also had the Jawatan Kuasa Dasar that was led by Professor Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunin. They submitted their report, but their job was only for 6 months. Ours was actually 2 years, end of this month. So let me actually basically mention a little bit what are the proposals, but I will not go into details because this will have to be mentioned by the Ministry of Education. One of the major proposal that we put actually to look at English language proficiency. Whether we like it or not, we cannot ignore the fact that whether we are in the public school or we are in the private school, English is pertinent. You cannot Google anything if you don't have English language. So it is something that we put forth quite a bit, very strongly. So we hope that the Ministry of Education will relook at it. We also discussed a lot about the PPSMI, whether that should be a reword, because PPSMI is a forbidden word, you know, it's not the word that we could talk about it. But at the end of it, we adhere to what the current Prime Minister did actually during the time before he was removed. He was taken from his job as Deputy Prime Minister. He endorsed the DLP, Dual Language Program, which I think Dr. Habibah at that time was the director of EPRD, yeah? And we put forth quite a strong suggestion for DLP, because DLP is the only avenues now for our students to be able to embrace more. So dual language program that we suggested a bigger number to cover a bigger number of schools, and we also put a suggestion for it to be implemented in the fully residential school. There are 69 fully residential schools. We hope that after sorting out some of the issues, this can be implemented because they are more or less ready. They have more or less almost all the facilities, teachers and students who are already selected in the school. And the second one that we put, and we also suggested, we only can suggest, we don't make the decision. We also suggested for English to be a compulsory passing subject by certain years. I can't mention the year, so that the students' parents will take it more seriously. It's not only in the urban area, but also in the rural area. This actually something that we are very passionate about. Other than that, we also did a little bit of research and review, and we formed a task force, a very robust task force, people not only from the Ministry of Education or Higher Education, but also from outside on pendidikan Islam, Islamic education. Islamic education is important. We do need to have values, either they are universal or just certain part of the religion, but there were a couple of comments that came out, like the former Prime Minister was mentioning that too many subjects, too many periods were put across. So we review, and a lot of things were not really exactly true. But we do want to make sure to ensure, we put a suggestion that let it be, when you learn Islamic education, let it be translated to the character of the person. Let it be more successful in terms of day-to-day work activities that we do, because you can't just have the values, we can't just teach the subject, but at the end of it, we need it to be totally, fully embraced in terms of producing our future manpower. Another aspect that we also put very strongly, and in fact, it was quite successful, and I think YB Dr. Mazli been talking about it in Parliament lately as well, is the special needs education. This is basically inclusivity. We are talking about zero reject policy. MPPK, our NEAC, I must say very proudly that we were part of the bigger group. Actually, we put the suggestion to the Ministry of Higher Education, and they have accepted it. We came up with the guidelines and how do we go about it. But of course, implementation is not as simple as that, but we hope that this will be pursued further. And another aspect that we put forth was on the public-private partnership. Today we are seeing actually public-private partnership is happening. So how actually the Ministry of Education could leverage on the participation of private sectors in actually complementing education for our country. I was the education advisor for Khazanah for 7 years. And I know that Khazanah and the other funders have spent more than $500 million in helping the ecosystem of the country. So these are the things that the Ministry of Education, Dr. Habibah is one of them who were very much into that, as help to make sure that, to ensure that we can't do trust school in our school, but we can actually have a lot of those good substance that has been proven right to be included. And last but not least, that we put forth was actually in looking at teacher professionalism. Teacher professionalism, actually we form a task force also that is very robust. We have 2 professors from universities, we have people from outside who have been in education, but yet they are not educationists. And we hope this actually just been proposed, been put forth to Dr. Habibah and SecGen last week. We hope this actually will take the education as a profession one day. As it is now, teachers are not really professional. We think that they are professional. Actually, in the real service, they are not. So they are just like support staff, which is very sad. Every time we talk about memertabatkan guru, but this is in reality not happening. But this also cannot just about that, but it must also come with quality. How do we ensure quality? How do we ensure there is continuity and so on? And I think the private-public partnership that I have mentioned just now, and teacher professionalism, I don't understand. And lastly, I want to conclude by saying it doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter in which area, space that we play. We have to know something. What we want to do actually is for the country. I think people like me, we have retired, we have come back, we never stop. We do a lot of things for education. Actually, for your information, I would like you all to know as well. We sat for 2 years in NEAC. We had many, many meetings, but we are not being paid. It is pro bono job. So many people said we were being paid. No. So this is from the heart. So we just hope politics will not make use of education and ruin everything that has been happening. And I sincerely hope that let us ask our heart, ask ourselves, let's put our thought and mind into improving our education system, whether it is K-12 or higher education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So covering those 5 key points, obviously the improvement of English language provision, Islamic education, special needs, public-private partnerships, and also enhancing teaching as the professionalism of teaching. Just a quick follow-up. I'm just wondering, all those changes of ministers, did that affect your work? You were kind of saying we continued on, but it must have had some effect.
Yes, not really in the sense that because we meet with the higher officials, but we try very hard to meet the ministers. And actually, in December last year, we actually submitted all these proposals except for the teacher enhancement quality. It was actually approved by Dr. Mazli. But of course, Dr. Habibah will need to do all the dirty job in seeing whether that can be implemented or not. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go over all the way to Putrajaya, I hope, where I'm assuming Prof. Mushtak is in his office in the campus at Heriot-Watt. Prof. Mushtak, are you there?
Yes, I am with you. I'm actually speaking to you from home, not from Putrajaya, but yes, that's the new world we are in.
Sure, no problem.
I'm trying to turn on my video, but it's not turning on because the organizer is not turning that on. Are you not interested in seeing me and you'd like me just to talk? I'm very happy to do that.
We've got a very nice photo of you, so that will suffice, but we'll try and get the video on as well, but Please continue with your remarks.
Thank you very much. I listened to the previous 2 speakers with a lot of interest, and I intend not to repeat what they have said for 2 reasons. First, I'm not from that realm of the education, but also because they've said sufficient. So I'll focus on really thinking of what kind of education do we need for success and for recovery, and then reflecting over what kind of infrastructures, whether being mental, physical, or policies that we will need to achieve that education. So the education system, to my mind thus far, has perfected the acquisition of knowledge and the development of technical skills. This is about really knowing and doing. And these are extremely important things. We want our doctors to be the best and our engineers to know all about the standards, and we need our accountants to know how to balance the books. And I think generally education worldwide, particularly in Malaysia, has done very well in these realms. But there's another thing that we know, which is knowledge and skills, knowing and doing, will not be sufficient to ensure individual and societal success. We know this because employers have been telling us for decades now that they're looking for human skills, they're looking for soft skills, they're looking for positive mindset, they're looking for collaborative attitudes, they're looking for a whole set of behaviors that goes beyond knowledge and skills. Again, I want to repeat that knowledge and skills are very important, but they are now being taken for granted. If you are doing an engineering degree for 4 years, I expect you to know about thermodynamics. But how about public speaking? How about working with other people? How about being entrepreneurial in your mindset? Now, this trend has really been accelerated by the IR 4.0. And I have a slightly different take on the IR 4.0. I think the IR 4.0, our response to it should not be only through putting everyone through computing and data programs, because these jobs will also be limited. I think the impact of IR 4.0 on us, on our jobs, is that it's taking the jobs that are requiring mainly knowledge and manual or easy to replace skills. So IR 4.0 has been creeping into the human jobs and really taking them and leaving us only with the purely human jobs, the jobs that require dealing with uncertainty, requires building trust, building teams, building consensus. These are things that machines can do. Now, what the crisis of COVID-19 did to this trend, it really accelerated it. So now we know what technology can do. We know now that we could communicate and we could work and do so many things using technology. And this is good, but at the same time, it means that more jobs that used to be done by humans are now, will be taken by technology. So what should we do? I believe that education needs to focus, besides the knowing and doing, besides the knowledge and the skills, to being. So to move from knowing and doing into being. So developing emotional intelligence, developing resilience, developing the human side of our graduates is extremely important. I know that many academic institutions around the world would say, but that's what we are doing. Our graduates are communicators, our graduates are team builders, our graduates are all of these things. But I really want us to really take a critical look at us and we ask ourselves, are we willing and able to put these soft skills as program outcomes? The educators in the room, they understand what I mean. It means that students cannot graduate until they prove that they are resilient. Students cannot graduate until prove they are effective communicators. Are we ready to do that? That's what I'm talking about. Because rather than it's things that are talking about in the generic. Now, I know that this is very difficult because soft skills are very hard to develop. And soft skills are very hard to examine and very hard to certify. But I think what is happening is the technology and the crisis and the difficulties that the world is going through has shown us that it is not sufficient to be gainfully employed and adding values based only on the fact that we remember some facts and we could put them into action. This is not sufficient. This is being and will continuously be replaced by the computers. So what should we do? I have few things in my head. Some of them are for the policymakers. Some of them are for us as parents and educators. I think the first thing is we need to recognize that during these challenging times, we have learned a lot. We have learned how to administer an online exam. We have trusted our students with exam papers. We have learned how to teach online and to trust that our students will acquire the material. And I was talking to one of our board members, and she was telling me, can you explain to me what is online education, digital education, blended education, and all of that? And I told her, sorry, the question was online learning and digital learning, and I told her, remember that learning happens only in one place. It happens only in the human mind. Now, all of these are things to enable learning. So I think the things that we've learned on how to be effective, how to be flexible, how to be innovative, these are things that beyond COVID and into the next year, I'm really hoping that the different policymakers will embrace rather than wait for the time where we go back to what we used to do. But we need to embrace it so that Malaysia becomes a powerhouse of innovation regionally and also globally. For us as educators and administrators of education institutions, I hope that this time we start putting the soft skills, the resilience, and the sense of purpose at the center of our work, because this is what makes us human. This is the thing that machines will not be able to do. We call this positive education. So for example, I ask my students, not what course you want to do, but I ask them what impact on the world do you want to have. And trust me, they are dumbfounded, they are like, sometimes they're shocked, and they say, I'm 18 or I'm 19, no one has ever asked me to do that. So in my university, and just allow me to say this is not promotional at all. We spend like 3 weeks of the first semester working with each and every student to develop an impact statement, to say why they want to be an actuarial science or an engineer, and what impact do you want to have on the world. And yes, there are students at the end of this, they change their major, change the university, because they actually recognize that there is life that is bigger and beyond just the education, and also they recognize that the magic that they bring and the skills that they bring, when they are linked with the sense of purpose, then resilience will happen, because people who know why they are doing what they are doing are the ones who are able to stick to their guns when things are difficult. So what I'm trying to say is we really need, as educators, to think of ways to really, truly develop and measure these skills that we have been talking about, the resilience, and the employers have been talking about, the resilience, the purpose, the mental health and mental well-being. All of that actually can be taught, but it has to be taught in a different way to the way we teach skills and we teach knowledge. We need to, thirdly, we need to develop the graduates who have these holistic skills that machines can't deliver, and together with them, we need to see things from a different perspective. So I have developed something, I call it the Corvette Framework. So you think COVID, you think always of the difficulties and the challenges that we are facing. But COVID to me the C stands for communication. How do you communicate effectively? How do you tell us your story in a very inspiring way? The O is for opportunity. There will be opportunities in every challenge. You really need to go and find them. I don't know what is the opportunities for you, but you have to start from the thinking that there will be opportunities, and always think of how to add value. I don't want our graduates to go out there and say, I have a degree in mechanical engineering. They need to go and say, this is the value I could add to this company, to this group, and that's how they can get the jobs. The V is for vision. We all need to have a vision for the world. We need to have a vision for recovery. I hear people saying, when will this whole thing, disappear so I can go back to my life? And I think no one will be able to go back to the life we have left before COVID. So we need to see a vision. Will that be a green recovery? Will that be something else? So we need a vision of how do we want the world to be. The I is for impact, because we need to know what impact we want to have on the world. And we need to inspire our graduates. We need to inspire our children, whether they are in primary school or secondary or tertiary, to think of what impact they want to have on the world. This is so important. And this is so neglected as well. The D is for development, and it's really about learning, continuously learning and helping others to learn. So communication, opportunity, vision, impact, and development. This is how I would like us all to remember the COVID crisis. Because we'll be judged we will be judged after this crisis will be over by the amount of innovativeness, innovation, and compassion that we have shown through it. The last thing I want to say is that we all tell stories. We tell stories about who we are, and we tell stories about how the world around us works. And these stories end up being our realities because they really build our character and our identity. And to me, education is about inspiring others to tell more empowering stories about themselves and the world in which we work. So I really see our roles in education as the people who help others tell more empowering stories. And I hope that this session is a start for us to tell more empowering story about ourselves and the world in which we live. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mushtak. Maybe I can just answer a quick follow-up. First of all, it's great you've created a positive acronym out of COVID, communication, opportunity, vision, impact, and development. Obviously, you've been working with your students in terms of emotional intelligence and resilience. Have you noticed that they're better adapted to cope with the current crisis than perhaps others are because of that education?
Well, I'm very careful when I talk about these things because there are anecdotal examples. But what I can tell you, those who are clear of their purpose, and many of the students who come through our university, because we have built in these programs to build emotional intelligence as part of the program structure, they actually have shown a lot of resilience. They have shown a lot of positivity, and we also have seen it. I'm yet to really be able to provide data, but even in employability, because even those who graduated at the most difficult times, if they are able to show company, and they are flexible enough, and they are able to show companies that they can add value, they are actually able to get jobs. I can tell many anecdotal stories about the engineering students who went on his own and started a movement to 3D print a contraption to help the health professionals wear the masks, because if you see the mask, it doesn't reach you at the end of your head, and a lady is wearing a scarf, for example, it's very difficult for them to wear it, and he designed a contraption specifically for that. So I would like to say yes, but because as a scientist, I'm yet to have the data to support that. But anecdotally, absolutely yes. And I'm sure other universities are, and other educators are trying that. So I don't want to make them feel, less caring for their students. I'm sure we are all doing that. Maybe the only difference, as you know, Guy, is that we made this a requirement for, moving from year 1 to year 2 in my university. And I think this is really what I'm proposing, that we become even more serious about doing that. The other challenge is for us to develop emotionally intelligent and resilient graduates. We really need to ask ourselves, are we emotionally intelligent ourselves? And are we resilient ourselves? That's why in Heriot-Watt, we actually made every one of our staff, academic and professional services, to go through the work of developing an impact statement. So this is actually quite a big undertaking, because it's not something that you could do at the corner of the university. As I said, it has to be really central to who we are and what we do.
Great. Thank you very much, Prof. Mushtak. If you can obviously stay online for the questions that we hope will come from the audience in a minute, and if you can do us a favor and perhaps mute yourself so we don't get the feedback echo. But Prof. Mushtak, thank you very much, and we'll obviously speak to you in a few more minutes. Now can I turn to Dr. Yatela, from the Yayasan Sime Darby. Dr. Yatela, you have some slides, so let's make sure that we can get those slides up. Great, Dr. Yatela.
Okay, thank you. The slides are on there, but they're not there. Okay. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks, Guy. To cultivate the right education ecosystem post-COVID-19, before I go into that, I'd just like to tell the audience who do not know about Yayasan Sime Darby that we are the philanthropic arm for the 3 Sime Darby companies. We were founded in 1982, And we focus on sustainable initiatives in our 5 pillars, which are education, community and health, environment, sports and arts and culture. Okay, now before we go into the right ecosystem, education ecosystem post-COVID, we have to acknowledge the challenges that we are still facing today in education. And the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, as well as Dr. Habibah, had mentioned before, it is access to education. 1.5 billion children and youth could not go to school in 160 countries, according to World Bank. A staggering amount of kids who have to stay at home studying from home. And the challenges definitely would include the access to the education, because all education is remote, home-based learning. You have to have the right resources at home. You have to have a computer or at least a smartphone to actually access education. And that's very difficult for the underprivileged. From Yayasan Sime Darby point of view, our beneficiaries, the kids of Yayasan Chowkit, those we take off the streets to actually, for the refugees to learn how to read and write and count, as well as the poor kids to actually learn soft skills and develop themselves. They need to have those equipment. And Dr. Habibah mentioned just now, the percentages are very, very low, especially for those who are underprivileged. And once you overcome that challenge, the challenge is then the access to internet. Once you have the resource, the hardware, you have to have the data. And we have to thank our government with, in cooperation with the telco companies. They've given 1 gig of daily internet data free to everyone. And that really played a big role to the underprivileged kids that we have been supporting in Yayasan Chowkit, in Ideas Autism Center, where we support underprivileged kids who have autism. And they also had to go online to actually learn, and this helped them tremendously. I'd like to thank the government and telco companies for that. And YTL Communications also gave SIM cards with 40 gig for free, smartphones with 120 gig SIM cards for free. All this actually helps a lot to actually give access, and we really need to work together to provide this kind of ecosystem going forward. Nothing's going to change. It's going to be like this. And once you have the data, internet, the problem is the coverage, whether it's strong enough. I'm sure you've all heard of Viviana from Pitas Sabah. Her video went viral. She spent 24 hours on a tree because she wanted to get good internet, because she's a UMS science student and she had to take 2 exams. And she was on the tree taking the exams because the hut shed that she built in a place was blown away. And her house doesn't have electricity, it doesn't have running water. Just imagine that, how resilient this is. Prof Mushtak was mentioning about resilience, and she's such a good example. But her story shows us that the disparity of access to data, internet data, which leads to and results to disparity in access to education of those who are in rural areas as compared to urban, right? So once you got that over and done with, now you have to look into the e-learning, the remote learning, the quality of the teaching and the interactions between the teachers and the students. Are our teachers trained in e-teaching, e-assessments, etc.? Are we giving them a chance to actually understand what they're going through? And I can't really, sorry. There's a disrupted learning plan. They have to now, when we're going to school now, the kids have just started to go to school, the teachers are saying that they have to catch up because their learning plans have been disrupted. And also the Deputy Minister mentioned just now about tertiary students having to go to labs to actually do their work and study, the PhDs and masters. And not to mention about mental stress that both the teachers as well as the kids have to go through because of this new, totally new environment that is here to stay. We cannot go back. It has to be blended learning. Now, even more, these challenges affect the marginalized students. We have to think about those who are coming from the B40 families, the ones that we work with, Yayasan Sime Darby work with. We have to think about those undocumented children, the children with visual impairment, hearing impairment, those with autism. We cannot leave anyone behind. So public and private sectors must come together and find a sustainable solution so that everyone has access to education. And these are the challenges. Everybody is talking about it. We have to do something seriously sustainable about this. All right, Prof. Mushtak also mentioned about soft skills, the importance of soft skills. Now, with COVID, schools, tertiary learning institutions have focused on the academics. These are the fundamentals of learning. These are the challenges, the academics. But what about the non-academics, the skills? What about the soft skills? Those are real issues that we need to address. Like, for example, schools have started, but since the MCO, the school children have not been allowed to do any extracurricular studies in schools, as well as sports. You know, soft skills development in government schools are on hold until today. So what we need to do is to actually focus on getting the content out there into the digital world to ensure the access of kids to content that will develop, number one, skills which are non-academic, and number two, soft skills. I'll give you some examples of what Yayasan Sime Darby does. We actually work Malaysian AIDS Foundation, Malaysian AIDS Council to actually do a short film competition. It's called the YSD Red Ribbon Competition, where secondary school kids have to, are encouraged to research about the issue of people living with HIV and stigma against them, and come out with a short film, and they win an awesome prize. Another example is our Sime Darby Football Development Program to assist kids to actually develop their skills in football. That's happening now, of course with social distancing. Another very good example is to build the innovative mindset. Our partner here today, also with Chumbaka, we have the Sime Darby Young Innovators Challenge to actually support innovative mindset among secondary school kids, the teachers, undergraduate students, etc., to come up with ideas to develop, to support the communities, local communities. Previously it was done physically. This year it's done online, but we actually did it before COVID, so we were way ahead. But the problem now is how to get the schools to buy into our problems, because the schools are catching up with their studies, the academic studies. So, but the policy must be out there that schools must also focus on extracurricular studies. All right, now before that, Sime Darby Arts Festival. We are trying to create creativity and visual arts competitions as a part of our satellite programs for our arts festival, as well as performing arts at home. And with the Ask Dance Company, we are doing online dance classes for traditional Malay dances, and we've got MOE's approval so that these dance classes, once the kids sit for it and complete it, they can use them for extracurricular points. So I think this is one of a kind. And the last thing I'd like to say is that Yayasan Sime Darby also gives out a lot of scholarships, and we believe that what we are doing with the government to focus on giving out vocational education is very, very important. And we'll continue doing that. 400 scholarships a year that we are giving out. We're hoping that the government will change, because we're working with the government on the fields of study, and we hope that all the fields of study will be aligned to post-COVID, the situation with IR 4.0, so that we will be giving the right jobs to the kids after they finish their vocational studies in order to transition from school to work, especially for the underprivileged, in order for them to get employment. Okay, so and that's it. You can actually scan our QR code to learn more about what Yayasan Sime Darby does. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yatela. And just a quick follow-up, and it's fascinating to read Dr. Yatela's background, and I hasten you should, that you started off as an accountant, then you felt the need to develop some interest in the underprivileged, and now obviously you're working with Yayasan Sime Darby. I'm just wondering, in terms of COVID, do you think that there's been an enormous step backwards for those underprivileged groups? You've already mentioned, obviously, kids with autism, visually impaired. Has it been a period when those kids have sort of lost ground?
Yes, we've been supporting the government to actually build, like for example, asrama desa, hostels that are nearer to schools, so that these kids can come out from their areas to actually study.
Yeah.
But now they have another different set of problems, which is internet. They don't have the resources to actually access education, and they don't have the internet to access. So that's another big challenge for them as well now.
Is there a solution to that, or?
We have to work together.
Sure.
The public and private sector will have to work together to actually think up of a sustainable solution. We know that this is a problem.
Yep.
And everyone's talking about this problem.
Sure.
But what matters is how we deal with it to actually ensure that we go forward, to actually close this disparity and ensure that education in Malaysia is inclusive.
Thank you so much. That's great. Prof. Ilan, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, I'll be speaking more on the policies and the role of the whole higher education sector, because as I mentioned in my welcome address this morning, I also sit on the Pemuda IPTS, which has been recently set up to look into the policies and the way the private higher education sector has to be taken up. So this Pemuda IPTS is a council which involves all the membership, involves all presidents of the private higher education sector and senior officials from the various ministries who are involved in education. Now, under this Pemuda IPTS, we have set up, the minister has set up 4 working groups, technical working groups, and the first one is on policy, governance, and procedures. I also sit on this subcommittee on policies, governance, and procedures. And we have on financial sustainability, quality of students, programs, and institutions, and internationalization and promotion. Now, what are the initiatives? Now, so they want to highlight on the importance of the private higher education sector. Now, it's good that the government has finally recognized the private higher education as an industry which contributes towards the GDP. As I mentioned in my address in the morning, is currently close to 40 billion and has got a potential of growing to 80 billion by 2030. It's a very big industry, but unfortunately, we don't get the type of financial support which other industries with high GDPs are getting. Now, to see to this importance of private higher education, we have to enable more students to have access to tertiary education. Now, this is a serious matter. Currently, I don't think there is access, although access the meaning of financial support, we have PTPTN, but under the current situation, I think the model of PTPTN has to change because the biggest sufferers are the B40 group. And also some of the policies which hinder certain groups to enroll into tertiary education. As I mentioned, the most suffering are the B40. Yeah? And if you have seen records in the past, or even currently, every year about 500,000 students sit for SPM. Of this, about 20 to 25% do not enroll in any institution. leave alone tertiary, they don't go into TVET, they don't go into skills, they're nowhere. In fact, it is a loss to the human capital development of the country. To produce knowledgeable, high skill and holistic workforce. Now, what are the policies in place? To produce technopreneurs among graduates. Now, again, we have not seen any proper policies in place, but maybe now that's what we are there to see that these policies are put forward. To recognize Malaysia as an international education hub. Now, we don't have a pulling factor. Especially now with the COVID-19, we are faced with greater challenges. We always talk about why students from Nepal, they all go past Malaysia and they go to Australia because they can support themselves partially and work part-time. But in Malaysia, we are still struggling to get these policies across. Yep. And private higher education as a strategic industry for Malaysian economic growth. So we are already contributing this, but then if better recognition, then we can do more than what we are doing. So to address all this, we have to see what is the landscape, the current higher education landscape. We've got about 440 higher education institutions, of which 54 are universities and 10 foreign branch campuses, 37 university colleges, and colleges 339. Now, is this a big number or is it sufficient? But at one time we had about 800 over, and now we have gone down to 440. So we must know that whether for sustainability is this number is still big, or it has to be lower, or they need to be merged. So if you are merging or acquisitions, you must have the right policies to support acquisitions and mergers. So the other area is areas to transform the private higher education institution as a strategic industry. In this case, the government, the governance in the ministry, they want to be more agile. This is what they want to do. They want to have a transformed delivery, innovation and teaching excellence, internationalization, and sustainability. Now, sustainability has become a very big issue, as I put forward just now. And for statistics, you can see, in 2017, 33 IPTS closed down. 2018, 23 closed down. And 2019, 8 colleges closed down and 2 university colleges closed down. Now, this is all post-COVID-19. Now, during the COVID-19, we had more challenges. Students are not coming back, and the finances of the college are affected because they're not paying fees, and they're asking for discounts. Although the colleges and universities invested more in the infrastructure and retraining of the academics to cater for the distance learning mode. And also, even among the existing, only about 51% of the private higher institutions have been making profit, whereas 49 are running at a loss. And with this trend continuing for the next 1 or 2 years, we can see more maybe closing down. On the decline of international students, our target is 250,000 by 2025. We are not far away. And with the COVID-19, with all borders closed, how are we going to achieve this? So we need to have greater policies which will allow foreign students to come in. And one of the proposals we are putting in is that to do away with the approval by KDN. If government institutions do not need KDN approval to take in students, why should we have the KDN approval? And immigration alone is enough to take care of that. But the problem with all this is that when we discuss all these policies, sometimes we talk among ourselves. Didn't we talk about this 20 years ago? And we're still talking about it again after that. That means there must be political will before we can see the real things happening. And for enrollment, currently we have only 100,000. How are we going to achieve the 250,000? A lot of things have to change. We have to trust the students coming in. First of all, we don't have the trust. When they come in, we feel that they're going to come here to work. What is wrong in giving them some part-time jobs? Yeah, where currently they are taken by all the illegal workers, foreign workers. Why not give it to our students? They are more hygienic, they are better insurance coverage, they should be better. And the challenges, post-COVID-19, look at the total figure, 69 have closed down, more expected to close down this year. And as I mentioned, 49 are suffering losses. Majority unable to sustain without income by 2020. Reduced access by B40 group because the PTPTN does not cover the whole thing. Yeah, maybe only the fees, but they also need other support because parents prefer to send their children to work. If they've got 3 or 4 children, if each of them can bring back 1,200, that is how they're going to support the family because many of the parents have lost their income during this period. And decline in current local international students is our challenges. New international students declining due to border restrictions, and 20% of current international students are not returning, and implementation of digital education at private higher education institutions. These all are challenges. Now, what are the takeaway points? See, all the agencies within the ministry and not only education or religions, agencies have to work closely. They must trust the higher education institutions and the KDN issue, the B40 group, the M40 group, and PTPTN restructuring of the loan system. And in conclusion, there must be political will. Many times you see when there is a change in the government, things are not happening the way it was planned earlier. And now we have this document, the way forward, and our committee is working towards that. Hope we will sustain until the whole policies are implemented. And one of the greatest points our members have raised is sustainability. And if you don't get any support from the government agencies or the Ministry of Finance or the EPU, it will be a tough battle for the survival of the private higher education institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ernan. Just a quick follow-up, and Dato Palmjit in his opening remarks said we're not asking for money. Is it sensible to ask for some financial support from the government?
Because the first round we didn't get anything. Only there was some benefits for the SMEs where the academics or the staffs got some support. But that is insufficient because that's for only short period of time. Because a lot of other industries, they got big funding. Yeah? And if they've recognized the private higher education industry to contribute 40 billion, the amount of revenue, not only the 40 billion, we're talking about the employability. How many staffs you are employing, the spin-off, adding to the value chain. Yeah? But maybe some of the bigger institutions who are already on the profit side, maybe they may need only the recovery plan. But those who are on the lower or the SME type of institutions, they definitely will need the stimulus package. In fact, in one of our association partners have asked for about 10 billion. Recently, I think it's on the papers for 10 billion.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's difficult for them to start up again. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, let's open it to the... it's great, we've got a much bigger audience than we expected. It's fantastic that you're all here, and I hope you've got some questions that you can ask us. There are 2 microphones. There's a microphone over there on the right. There's a microphone over there on the left. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask? Nina Disney from Leap Education, who's one of the sponsors of the event. Nina.
Thank you, Guy. Yes, we've heard a lot. Yeah, morning, my name is Nina from Leap Ed Services. The question is this, that, we've heard a lot about the digital divide during COVID. It has we've seen that this gulf has in many ways widened. We see difficulties in terms of access to devices and connectivity. But my question is, beyond the hardware issues, what about the software issues in terms of, we've heard what Prof Mushtak said in terms of students having the soft skills to be able to access, to own their own learning, to be able to continue to want to learn, to have that motivation to learn despite the circumstances. So not just only the software of students, but also the mindset and software of teachers to have the agility and the adaptability to be able to, cope with what we have to come. So maybe a question, maybe Dr. Habibah, in terms of teacher professionalism, this also ties in with what Dato Satinah was saying about teacher professionalism and how we need to empower and make the teaching profession develop even further.
Thank you, Nina. Yeah, so the software, the soft skills, Dr. Habibah, maybe you could start the ball rolling on that one.
Yeah, okay. I had the opportunity once of being in this group, APEC group, looking at the requirements for the 21st century, particularly looking at skills and competencies, future skills and competencies. So while we have heard about the need, not just on the technical, the knowledge and technical skills, but also the soft skills, and that is what you have raised. So we were involved, the Ministry of Education was involved in coming up with a chapter of the report on these future skills, particularly the 21st century skills that's required. And definitely we looked at the various framework in the world of how people are preparing students for these future skills. So across the frameworks, there has been a lot of similarities, but then there are also differences. But the thing that stand out most was the cognitive skills that's required, the hard skills, the soft skills. And we also included at the center of these three components where we see is most important, particularly in our region, is the right attitude and values when you do develop those skills. For instance, when you do have the knowledge and these skills, what do you then use it for? Is it for the good or for the bad of mankind? And how do you share it? Those kind of attitudes as well as values. But back again to the soft skills, it was an important component within the framework as well. And looking at in the Malaysia situation, so while, for instance, when we talk about digital learning, we have started with the smart school qualification standards on how schools are managing with creating a digital environment within schools. So we have scores of schools from 1 to 5. And it's good to see that 98% of our schools fall between a score of 3 to 5. So there's only 2% that's below 3. So that indicates how ready our schools are. And we have moved further to just looking at the environment, but also looking at how the students are also coping with this digital learning. We also have the digital competency score, for instance. So it's very much related in how the leadership in schools, for instance, manage to create that digital-friendly environment in the school, despite the challenges that the schools are facing, and in coming out with children who are who score better in the digital competencies. But then again, with that, when we are measuring that, how do we then create that digital competency into having more creative and innovative students, which is part and parcel of not just the thinking process, but the skills that's required to go beyond than just the user of the technology, but also then become having the right attitude and having the right skills to then become a creator as well as the innovator. So the kind of things that needs to be in place, and of course the teacher is important in all this. And that's why we are trying to bring back children to school, despite we know the issues that we need to handle when we bring children back to school. But still, we feel that after a long time away from schooling, bringing back children and schooling is most important. So how do we then create the right skills among our teachers, particularly the soft skills? When COVID-19 pandemic happened, we were not ready. We were not ready. We didn't expect that. I think nobody expected that to happen. But then it happened. So how do we manage? But I think even before the situation happened, we were already moving towards professional development of teachers has always been there. But then because we saw the importance of digital learning, we were also preparing our teachers at that point of time. But to say that we are already at that stage where all our teachers are prepared to handle it, no, we are not. And we see also a difference between our younger sets of teachers and our older sets, more senior teachers, who are more able to adjust to embracing digital learning on their own, as well as to develop themselves. So there's also the gap there. That's why we are pushing our teachers towards embracing it, because that is how it is. Even among our school children, looking at those in the primary school, at the lower secondary as well as the upper secondary, although the instruments are different because of the different levels, age group, and so on, but then who are more competent in terms looking at just the scores and how they are handling the situation is the younger generation, because they are more exposed. They are the natives, although we say those in schools are the native now. But then it even becomes more difficult when we need to handle teachers who are not the natives, they are the migrants. So creating those kind of skills, as you rightly put, is most important among our teachers, who will then facilitate the learning amongst the students. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I've got some questions from the Zoom audience who are out there. A question from Dr. Sharifa Munira, who is from UKM and is also part of the G25 Malaysia group. She says the question is for Prof. Mushtak, but other panelists are invited to address it too. One problem Malaysia has faced, not just during the pandemic, but for decades, is the declining quality of soft skills, which obviously we've touched on already. We also see a lack of these skills among our academics at the universities. I see this as a ripple effect of neglecting humanities education from the primary and secondary school levels. How can we bring back the social sciences and humanities, such as philosophy and literature, for instance, to schools and universities if it has to compete with STEM education? In the Malaysian context, the challenges facing our diverse society go deeper than STEM education. We have societal problems, not because we lack engineers, for instance. Thank you. So, Mushtak, I hope you're still there.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Really great question, and you are asking it to an engineer.
I know.
I believe that engineering is really, the real engineering is about being equipped with the human skills first. So I think engineering is not only about technology. Engineers have to be humans before they can be successful engineers, because they are there to engineer another human being's experience. And if I were to try to respond to this question, and maybe to the comment by Nina as well, I really believe that the final frontier is mindset. And you know, interestingly, it goes across the socioeconomic groups. So poverty is essentially a mindset. It's never about really who has or doesn't have money. It has a financial element, absolutely, but at the most fundamental, it is a mindset issue. Now, we also deal with students from relatively more affluent socioeconomic background, and they are very good academically. And sometimes when you speak with them, you know what's the really struggle that they're having is self-esteem, self-confidence. So mindset is really, really important. And if you ask me how to deal with all of that, I think if we had to do only one thing that will help us have better mindset, better soft skills, better whatever, it would be purpose. So I think people, when they are more aware of their sense of purpose, when they are told, you are here for a reason, And even if you are just one individual in a village, in Tanah Merah, in Kelantan, or wherever, you are actually able to have an impact on the world. The impact could be small or big, but you have an impact. You are an important part of the world. So how do we do it? So we teach every one of our students, we give them like a 2-hour lecture, we call it brainology. We just teach them how the brain works, because guess what? Confidence, self-esteem, good emotions, self-doubt, all of that they are just neurochemical signals in our brain that gives, emergence to the mind. And the moment we understand it, we are able to deal with our own emotions and the emotions in other much better. And that will make us better at a whole range of soft skills. The other bit, which is slightly bigger, we are a relatively small university with an intake of 500 students. We have to make every one of them develop an impact statement over 3 weeks in the first semester. And what does that mean? That means that myself, my senior leadership teams, and the most passionate academics and professional services staff, they need to come and facilitate this in groups of 5. And then at the end of the day, when the students have an impact statement, they are like, wow, now we know why we are doing what we are doing. We attract very, very smart students to our actuarial science students, very good students, very good in math. And then when you ask them, why are you doing actuarial science? Most likely they would say, well, my parents told me to do it. I like math and I think I can get a good job. Well, okay, fine. At the end of the impact statement, I'll read you an impact statement of a real first-year actuarial science student. He said, I am a lover of math. I will use my love for math to reduce complexity for others when they need it the most. I am an actuary. Every time I read this, the hair at the back of my neck stands up. I even told this to the president of the professional body that organizes the actuarial profession, and he said, even professional actuaries are unable to explain to people what do actuaries do, like this boy did. So I think if we actually can find a way and it starts by ourselves, every one of us can think of their own purpose and can talk to few people beyond themselves. Now, if you are in a position of leadership, please try to promote this idea. If anyone wants me to come and help them do an impact statement workshop in their school, call me, I'll do it.
Great.
So I think let's start somewhere. Honestly, this is not something that you can just wait for the government to do. I think we all can do it. If we have a sense of purpose, I think the world will be a better place for each and every one of us.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Yatela, this question about humanities, I know some of the work you've been doing with Yayasan, Sime, Darby is sort of introducing arts, and is it an issue here in this country?
For soft skills, yeah. Yes, very much so, Guy. What we believe in is that children from a very, very young age, until they go up to tertiary studies, they have to be exposed to much more than the academics. Knowledge is very important, as Prof. Mushtak mentioned, but the other skills and soft skills are very important. And how do you get those kinds of other knowledge which are non-academic and the soft skills? Expose our kids and our youth to things like the arts, sports. So many kinds of soft skills can actually be learned through these two different, very different areas of learning, which our kids really require, but do not have the exposure to actually have the ability to embrace, especially those who come from underprivileged backgrounds, especially in schools that are in rural areas. They don't have that kind of exposure. So the ecosystems and the environment in schools and in universities, in higher learning education, must have these contents readily available. And the teachers and the administrators who run the education centers must have in their mind the knowledge of sharing this, and actually for my PhD, just a little bit, to actually develop the resilience, the environment is very important. Warmth and support, training and discipline, and religiosity. These three things must be in the environment to push for exposure to all these to develop the right soft skills. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Dato Satinah, did you cover the idea of introducing humanities and that tension between humanities and STEM education in your report? And even if you didn't, do you think it's an important issue?
Sorry. We did, certainly, because we were looking at Islamic education together with civics. So we felt that it should be integrated. You can't have a group of students learning civics and the other one are deprived of that, and Islamic education is another portion. But I just wanted to touch a little bit, because we are talking about public school. I happen to be also in many private and international school board members. So I think what we did during the initial stage of COVID-19, the pandemic, it was amazing. I was looking at some of the schools that I'm very involved with, how actually they put parents, children, and leadership in the school. And that really actually helped the school, the students actually to be at leaps and bounds in managing learning in the respective classroom. Of course, private school, they are a lot more comfortable with finance. But those companies, they spend a lot of money in actually enhancing soft skills, leadership, and so on.
But can those lessons be transferred to the public system, or?
Yes, as a matter of fact, one of the group of schools that I'm a chair of those schools, we actually work very closely with the government. So we told them how to go about it, and we are willing to even share the modules that we have developed with our public schools. Yeah, surrounding especially. Thank you.
We've got time for one more question, I think. Yes. Better put my glasses on, excuse me. Hello, sir. If you can introduce yourself, and can you keep your question very brief, because we're at the end of this session.
Right, thank you, Guy. I'm Jeffrey Luis from NAPEI. I do not know whether this is going to be a question or it's going to be a comment or my observation. Now, the first thing that I'd like to know is the panelists, if you can. Let's not take sides on political and what we're doing. If you're going to be frank, you better be frank, because it's best to be frank with all of us on what's happening. Now, why I'm saying that is because I like to look at this part on the cultivating the right education ecosystem post-COVID-19. My question is leadership. Do we have the right leadership to take on this post-COVID situation? Now, there's a lot of things that have been said about skills, attitudes, a lot of things have been done, but do we have the right leadership to take on this role in the education framework? That's my question. Yeah.
Perfect, that's perfect, thank you very much. Well, you represent a huge number of private institutions. Do they have the right leaderships in place?
I think as far as private schools are concerned, I think they have the right leadership, because they have a lot of best practices. Even before, the SOPs during the COVID, I think the private schools came up with the required standard order procedures before the government came up, and especially NAPEI, we shared this with the ministry, because we work with the international group and we get use a lot of best practices from our foreign partners. So we are well equipped. We have a leadership, yeah.
Great, thank you. Dr. Habibah, leadership across schools, across the ministry, however you want to tackle that question.
I think as what we do with our teachers, where there's professional development, we also do the development of officers and staff at various levels. And particularly to go into a leadership position, we also have our search search committee as well as our talent pool as well to develop people into certain positions, either at the district, state, or at the ministry level. And part of that development of the talent pool and succession into certain positions, we have certain guidelines and SOPs that we need to, that we have put into place and follow through. And part of it is using profiling, profiling people and looking at the profiles and to see where the gaps are and to develop them further. So in considering people into certain positions, we do that development as well as the profiling exercise. The profiling is very much embedded into the behavioral event instrument that we are using. At the school level, I think other than the teacher, the leadership within the schools are most important. And if you see within the blueprint, if previously people move into leadership positions at schools, it has been primarily on seniority other than merit. You move based on seniority into those positions. But we have embedded a prerequisite for our head teachers, which is they need to go through the MPQEL, which is a leadership course, so that those that meet a certain threshold only can be considered into the leadership position in schools. So I think I totally agree that we need to have the right leadership at the various levels in order for what that we have planned be able to be carried out. And in many occasions, among the criticisms that we receive is we have very beautiful documents, especially planning documents and policies in place, but then we fall short of the delivery. So for that delivery to happen, we need the right people at the various places to play their role.
Great, thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. There are plenty more questions that we could have answered. Apologies if we didn't get to anybody out there who wanted to ask a question. If you could put your hands together and thank the esteemed panel both here and in Putrajaya. Thank you very much.